We're back.
We're back.
Clint Bruce, Uncle Bruce,
What's up?
back for the third time on the 38 Challenge podcast. Episode 40. Took a little hiatus.
Awesome.
Yeah. Took a little
That's
hiatus.
a good number.
Yeah. Clint will be back on a bunch, but wanted to kind of shake the cobwebs off.
Yeah.
And get back into the swing of things, get back to making awesome conversations that'll help.
This is the part where you tell me what you want to talk about, then I go, here's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Well, we already did that. But yeah, man, let's start with just kind of rip the Band-Aid off here and start why it's been so long since we've been making these episodes. And, you know, you've seen,
I love that.
Yeah, you've seen kind of what's been going on with me and my mental health. And, you know, I think you saw the person who I was before and then the person during it. Yeah. And, you know, the same person, but very different.
And degrees. I mean, it's like this redistribution of our personality. Like it's like, I think we all have a form of multiple personalities, and it's kind of like, hey, which one is driving right now?
Right.
It's like most of life is like having a 15-passenger van with 15 different versions of you inside it, and what we're trying to do is make sure the right person's driving.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, you know, so for me, I've dealt with anxiety and depression before.
Sure.
This brought me to my knees.
Yeah, it was pretty exponential.
Yeah. No, it was and it's just so many lessons learned throughout it, and just the way that I view mental health and anxiety and depression and all of it is just, you know, pretty different. But, you know, long story short, moved from Austin to Dallas. So we're now hosted in the
high ground,
in the high ground. And, you know, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we thank you for hosting us here. And you know, kind of just decided one day to pick up. You know, you and I were on the
I remember asking you. I was like, "Hey, man, who you chasing?" And if the people you're chasing, you got to surround yourself with people that you're trying to keep up with. And if you're trying to keep up with someone who's maybe only 2 or 3 more years down the road than you, then the best they can ever do for you is get you 2 or 3 years down the road. That's your horizon, right?
Right.
When you're living on the high ground, you just have a larger perspective over all the kind of humanity in life. And I mean, the shared life experiences that you heard me say this before, like, that's why I love kind of building this living library around me. And I try to do my part to contribute to it too. And you've heard me say this before. I say, hey, I was talking to this UFC fighter the other day, and I said, hey, man, if you and I are fighting and I'm remembering and you're learning, I'm going to win, because remembering is faster than learning. Mm-hmm. And when you're deliberate about surrounding yourself with people who have just lived more than you, there's more chances for you to get to learn from them what they learned the hard way. And when your time in that crosshairs comes, you now have an opportunity to remember what they did instead of, learn the hard way what they learned the hard way too. And it's kind of that chase, pace, and pull mentality. And when you were down in Austin's great, man. It's a fine place. But the ecosystem you guys had around you was just plus you, minus you by a little bit of life. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, this isn't a good or bad thing. It's just who are you chasing.
Yeah, and I think, you know, because I remember talking to you and I was like, I want to move to Dallas and I have amazing, amazing friends in Austin, and I honestly love the city.
I don't.
People that I love, and but I told you, I was like, you know, I want to move to Dallas. I want to start to become the man that God wants me to be.
Sure.
And what I realized during these last couple months, just a lot of changes. Like body was broke down. You know, felt like I lost my mind, and you know, what people need to understand is like becoming the person who you want to become. For me, I was like, I'm just going to go to Dallas, eliminate distractions, you know.
You think it's a light switch.
Work out twice a day, but it is it is a brutal process changing who and turning into, and it's a process that never ends.
Well, in somewhat times when you change your location and advantage yourself where you can do the deep work on yourself, the problem is now you got to do the deep work,
Right.
and it feels worse, right? There's a difference between working out and training. Like for me, it's like here, there's a difference between going to the range and putting yourself in a hostage rescue, a hyper authentic environment. Like you go to the range, and that's marksmanship, right? Because you can't replicate the fight that you're training for. You drop yourself inside of a shoot house. Now you're replicating the environment. Now you're training, and so training's harder than working out because training is a campaign.
Right.
You know, it's different going to a course and a class. Like a course has a defined defined beginning, and a class is perpetual, right? And it's and so it feels worse because you're doing more work because you simplified your life and allowed yourself to go deeper. But that work is often hard.
Right.
And it hurts.
Dude. And I think, I remember laying, and I'll do a different episode where I kind of detail the feelings. I think it's important. Like
that's worth its own show.
Yeah, exactly. But I just remember being in bed, debilitated by anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And for me, I was like, I'm asking for help. Like I'm being vulnerable. I'm doing all the things that I'm talking about. Why do I not feel better? And I think that really changed my perspective on the vision.
Yeah.
Because there really is nothing harder than going through dark times and working on your mental health.
You know, it's kind of like if we stay consistent with like the workout analogy. Like, hey, I'll give you points for buying a gym membership, and I'll give you points for going to the gym where you bought the membership,
or buying a trainer,
and I'll give you points for going to the gym where you bought the membership and working out. But when you really start doing the work, is when you go to the gym that you bought a membership on. And you hook yourself next to someone who knows how to get you where you say you want to go. That always hurts worse.
Right.
But you always get there faster when you do it that way.
Right. Yeah. And, for me, it was like for the first time since high school, I was not exercising.
Yeah.
For the first time in my life, I didn't want to be around people. Like just felt like it wasn't me. And I know that there's so many people out there feeling the same thing right now.
Yeah, but in a way, what I tell you is when you're in the right environment, it's a safe place to break. Breaking always sucks. It never feels good. But you can advantage yourself and allow yourself to, and we're all broken. What Hemingway say, we're all broken, and most of us are better at the broken spots. And you have kintsugi, which is the Japanese art of using gold to repair broken pottery, and it's more beautiful because the gold is in there, right? And surrounding yourself with the right people and going to the right places, what allows you to do is break safely. And we got to break ourselves from these things that got us here, because a lot of times what got us here won't keep us here. It's not enough, right? And so that's the thing, that old saying, like, you're the sum of the 5 people you're around. The only thing I just debate on that is whether it's 5 people, 7 people, 9 people. That's the only thing, or 3 people. It's just not a debate that's what happens. But you can choose who you surround yourself with. You can choose who you're chasing. You can choose who you're keeping pace with. You can choose who you're pulling behind you. And those create environments where it's safer to go through the hard stuff. And your body kind of knows that. We've talked about this is my non-scientific assessment of the human machine. The human machine, the way I tell my daughters is the human machine has 4 performance systems. You have the body, the brain, the mind, and the soul. And the analogy that I use, the body is a car, the brain is a steering wheel, the mind is the driver, and the soul is this inherent sense of destination, right? Well, fundamentally, the body and the brain are just machines, but when an autopilot is just a machine, but an autopilot's going to take over when it has to, and the body and the brain will do that and the body and the brain will do that when it either absolutely has to, or when it feels like it's finally safe to. And sometimes when you're finally doing the deep work, it feels worse. But what's happened is the body and the brain are going like, all right, we're in charge now. We can't stay in this persistent fight or flight mechanism. So now that we're in a safe environment and we're surrounded by good people, we're just going to freaking shut down and do the stuff that we've needed you to do for a long time. Monkey brain takes over. It's like, all right, we're going to do what we've been asking you to do. But there's that movie. It's a horribly sad movie. I went and saw it with my girls, and I was like, I'm crying. Like I didn't want them to see me crying. But it's that movie Inside Out.
Right.
I think it's a Pixar movie.
Yeah.
And there's all these different personalities have voices inside the person. That is not an inaccurate statement of what's going on.
Not at all, man.
And at some point in time, the voices that are in charge of keeping you alive, they just kind of go, all right, dum-dum, we're taking the wheel. And it feels horrible. But it gets you to do the stuff that we should have been doing all along.
100%. Yeah, and I think, forget who says it, but maybe it's Jim Carrey or he's quoting someone, but he talks about depression.
He's a profound guy, man.
Yeah, he talks about depression and really what it is deep rest. And for me, depression, deep rest, and for me, the hardest thing for me to do was rest. I remember
rest feels idle.
Yeah, I'd resting and taking a step back, and prioritizing space and understanding that you can't go 100 miles an hour all the time. Like those were huge lessons for me, man, and like one that put me on my ass.
Hey, man, scripture is clear. Be still and know that I am God.
Yep.
And I'm like, I know that you're God. Do I still need to be still? It's like, it's not be still and know that I'm God it's like, it's pretty clear. And like, all right, if you're not going to be still, I'm going to help you be still so I can do what I do, right? So it feels worse, but it's better, right?
Right.
And leg day always sucks until game day.
Yeah.
Leg day sucks till game day.
Unless you're Lucas, then Lucas loves leg day.
I love leg day too. I'm just saying it hurts. But on game day, now leg day doesn't hurt anymore. Like ask Saquon Barkley, the dude, he's like a sycamore tree thighs, right?
Dude,
like those legs days hurt till you truck Nick Chubb over the Browns, man.
Looking at my chicken legs right
leg
now.
day hurts till you're trucking somebody.
And we talk about finite and infinite games, and there's not a whole lot more infinite than trying to win the war on suicide.
It's one of these things like, hey, this is a long fight, and I know what you're referencing. This is it's in the military, and not unique to the military, but the military is what's rightly being studied right now aggressively. And what we're paying attention to as veterans is the number of veterans that we're losing to suicide. And so one of the things you got to kind of come to grips with is it's going to happen. It's going to hit your world. And in order to stay in the fight, you got to figure out what to do when it happens, right? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's something we're all kind of processing this week with the loss of a great friend. And, I was talking to one of my buddies about it. I said, man, I had to build this kind of process that allows me to endure this so I can stay in the fight to stop this. And I don't know this is right or wrong. It's just what helped me is and I told you this too. I said, I kind of have these 3 phases. And the first phase is I allow myself to be mad at that person. And we don't want to be, because we feel like that diminishes them, or it's disrespectful of their memory, or it's negative. But if we really sit back and think about it, the people that make us most mad in the world are just the people we love. Like only the people we love can hurt us that much. And so most of our lives, we can remember where we were so mad at this person we loved, because that's who we're most vulnerable to. And what happens when we allow ourselves to be righteously mad is what always happens when we're mad at those we love. The mad fades, and then we just love them again, right? Mm-hmm. Like my wife's mad at me most of the time, right? It's just periodic enough to where she loves me more than she's mad at me. So it's an honest feeling, right? Mm-hmm. And when we do that, then the anger will fade and just the love is left, right, as it should be. And the second thing I learned to ask myself was, hey, did I have a role in this person having more days than they would have without me? big role, little role, a role. And the third question is, were the quality of those days that I had a role in helping them have, were they better? And again, putting myself through those questions is not to make it okay. It's not going to be okay, but it allows me to stay in the fight. You know, I was talking to a guy up at ATF earlier today, and we're talking about time stewardship. You know, and all of us, you know, guilt is something that only the good wrestle with. Only the good wrestle with guilt, right? And so when we feel guilty, it's an indicative of the fact that we're good, you know. So like only the good wrestle with guilt. So we need to wrestle with it well, or we just not need to be good. You just be shitbirds and not worry about it anymore, right? But I'm not going to do that. So now I got to figure out how to wrestle well with this thing called guilt,
Right?
And you know, survivor's guilt in particular is like, hey, why do I have time that those I love and miss don't anymore? For however we lost them. And for me, the analogy I've kind of put myself in is like if I'm in a big fight and my buddy goes down because he's hurt or we lost him, I use his rounds so I can win this fight. I'd much rather his rounds be with him. I'd much rather him be next to me in the fight. But I got to win this fight, right? And so I don't want to I wish I didn't have to use time that those I love and miss don't have anymore. But to not use those things, to not use my time. I mean, the worst thing we could do is waste the time we have that those who love and miss do not, whether we feel like we deserve it or not, right? Because I have these seconds and minutes, and I can either ponder why I have it and he doesn't, and I certainly do that, or I can put those minutes to work and try to 2x or 3x the ROT, the return on time.
Right.
It's kind of like, hey, I'm living for him and her too. And when you live like that, when you have this kind of sense of urgency, again, none of this makes it okay. And like there's a lot I'd trade back to have my dad past 1992, right? And I can either spend time mourning that, or I can spend time missing him and doing the work I know he would have done and what he thought was important for me to do. And in doing that, I've stewarded my time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, we kind of talked about it yesterday on those second and third points, but I just remember with Matt, and I think another interesting thing that I found through going through and isolating depression and anxiety is how much time you spend with your thoughts and how quickly those thoughts turn into things that you've done in the past that you've never thought about.
Yeah.
And you beat yourself up. You're like,
sure.
This is why this is happening because I did this 5 years ago. But I remember thinking a lot about Matt and, you know, when you said those second and third points, which really revolves around, did we have an impact? Did we make this person's life better? And I remember a couple times.
This was in December and January before we lost Matt. This time you spent with Matt.
Exactly. Yeah, I spent 3 months with him. So rewarding. I'm so glad that God gave me that. But we work out with each other twice a day. And
how would he describe those days?
Yeah, he said you know, we'd always, at the end of the day, my mom would always ask us, you know, what was your highlight of the day? And every single time he'd say working out with Brandt. Every time. And then
so question number 2, your answer is yes.
Yeah, exactly. And then
I have reason to believe that he had more days with me than he would have without me.
Right. And then another time I remember we were praying, he was praying for us and he was just like, God, you know, I thank you so much for my brother and how much he means to me. And those are the things that I'll never forget, man. And I just for who he was to me and how much he meant to me, to see that not only love, because I know he loved me, but to see that respect that he had towards me, man, like it gives me, I mean, I've got chills now.
There's a difference between putting something away and putting it in its place. We don't want to put it away. I don't want to miss my dad less. I want to miss my dad better. I don't want to miss my friends less. I want to just miss them better. And for me, missing them better means putting it in its place, not putting it away, not putting it in a box, putting it in the attic and only see it when I remember Sarah. Like I want to walk by the picture every day, miss him, and know that I'm using the time that I have, right? That's how I say I love you, is I use the time I do what you taught me to do with the time that I have that you don't. And again, there's a difference between putting it in its place and putting it away. And I'm not telling anybody to put it away. I don't want to forget these people. I just want to live with what I learned from them while I had them, right? And that's called putting it in its place.
Right.
So that's, I guess, what I've tried to do with that kind of 3-step deal is put it in its place. Not put it away, put it on the shelf, put it where I see it every day, put it where it reminds me of who I said it'd be when I was with them, put it where I remember who they said I could be even when I didn't believe it. That's putting it in its place. That is not putting it away.
And what those 3 questions allow people to do, because, you know, we're trying to save people from taking their lives, but we're also trying to support the people who are left
100%.
behind, and that's what those 3 questions do. Is they support people.
And listen, I'm not saying those are the 3 right questions. I'm just saying this is what I've learned to ask myself.
Right.
So I'm not telling anybody what to do, but when someone asks me what I do, here's what I do. And if that's useful and helpful, then man, use it, grab it, because there's work to be done. Like, I gotta stay in the fight. Right? You know, that's one I was talking to one of my friends one time. I was really struggling. And I think I've said this to you before, and this is all a projection, right? This is my best thinking that I can have as you're kind of contemplating that decision. As a guy who's come, you know, close to it in a few ways. I think most good people want to count more than they cost. And so when you start feeling like you cost more than you count, that virtuous, noble part of you will start speaking up again, but it's misaligned, and what it tells you is, hey, maybe everybody would be better if you stop costing so much. And what I told my friends is like, hey, I can't stop you from asking that question. You know, I'm not in your. I can't tell you to not ask that question. What I can tell you is don't answer it for me. Like, don't answer that question for me. You can ask yourself that question, but you can't answer. That's my question to answer. And if you ask me if I'm going to be better without you than I am with you, my answer is no. Let me answer it now. Let me answer it before you even ask yourself the question. Because when you're going to ask yourself the question, it's not when I'm around you, not when we're together. It's going to be when you're by yourself. And so when you ask that question, let me go ahead and answer it for you, right? No, I'm not better without you, right? And let me tell you how much you cost or count, not you, right? And again, it's just harder. It's only the good wrestle with guilt, man.
And I mean, I wasn't sure I was going to talk about this, but I wrestled with the same, because you and I talked about it. You know, you wrestle with those thoughts, man. And dude, the thoughts you're just talking about, right? Like, you know, I don't necessarily want to be here, and for me, that was such a selfish thought.
Because you've lived on the other side of that
right
question,
and I'm so glad that I listened to my own advice, because every time I was in a really bad place, dude. I mean, I remember calling you crying, like calling, you know, multiple different people that I love and respect, and just if I didn't call those people that I loved and who cared about me, I don't know.
If you answered the question for me,
right?
If you'd answer the question you're asking yourself for them,
right?
Somebody else don't.
And that was my point. Is like every time I would call someone and talk about kind of what I was going through, every single time they're like, you don't understand how much you are loved and how much of an impact you have on other people.
That's it, yeah.
And just hearing that, it was like, okay, this sucks. We'll get through it. I don't know when, I don't know how. And that's a difficult place to be in.
One of the things that's powerful to tell people, I mean, it's amazing to hear that you're loved. That's really important. In a weird way, that could make me feel worse. I'm already contemplating my value proposition to you, and you tell me how much you love me, then it makes me feel that much more responsible for wasting your time. That's my own internal dialogue. I'm not projecting.
Right.
But when you say you're making such a difference in other people's lives, when you're ratcheting up the count and reducing the cost, you know, I just had this conversation with a tier 1 bub the other. He's an amazing guy. I love him.
Is that the one that's here right now?
Yeah. And one of the things I told him, I said, hey man, you'll let yourself down way sooner than you'll let other people down. So if you're not doing this for you, you know, Do it for the ones. Help someone discover what you're trying to remember about yourself. So do it for somebody else, and indirectly you're going to be doing it for yourself. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've done the right thing because I knew someone was watching, not because I wanted to, or the hard thing, not necessarily the right thing. Doing the hard thing because someone was watching, not because I wanted to. And on the other side of doing the hard thing, I'm glad I did it. It almost doesn't matter why I do the right thing, right? And improving is a difficult deal, and especially if you're, like, one of the things that you're doing at 30 Challenge is you attacking the stigma of mental health. Epictetus says, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and crazy in your own day. Something like that, right? Because improvement is hard. And my deal is always making sure people know the difference they're making. And it's always more so than most people think.
Yeah. And also, I like the point that you made, because when you're experiencing depression, everything that it's said to you is through the lens of depression.
Yeah.
So it's people, like, someone can say you're loved, you're making a difference. It's like, well, what am I doing right now? I'm in bed. Like, I'm doing nothing. And then you start to beat yourself up more, and then anxiety increases, and then you're stuck in this.
Depression is like having a conversation with yourself inside a waterfall.
Yeah.
You're like,
dude,
a hot waterfall, not even a cool cascading one, right?
Right.
And that's my deal. Is like, that's why, going back to why you came up from Moss, it's like, man, you got to be around people who you listen to more than yourself sometimes, and then you need to listen to them, right? This internal dialogue is seizing control. That's a really big deal. And recognizing that if you're having a conversation with someone and they're not there, it's probably wrong. I tell my bride this all the time, like, hey, if you and I are fighting, can you just make sure I'm there? Because, like, whatever game theory version of Clint, like, I don't like that guy either. I'd have never said that. Right. But in her mind, I come home, we've had this fight 10 times. I ain't gotten home yet. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what did Clint number 7 say? Because you give me a chance to mess this conversation up with these fictional Clints that you're talking to. That's not me, right? But we all do that. Right. We all, hey, here's what Brandt thinks about me. I had this conversation with this really cool girl, man. She's going to Annapolis, and I'm really, really proud of her. And her sister's amazing too, just really special family. And I say, what's your greatest fear? She was disappointing the people I love. I'm like, that's awesome. That's a great fear. Do you know what disappointing them is? And she goes, what do you mean? I said, if you asked them, if your greatest fear is disappointing someone, then you might just ask them what
that looks like.
Disappointment actually is. Right. So I challenged her. I said, hey, go ask the 7 people you love most in the world, hey, give me 3 ways I can disappoint you. Mm-hmm. And then don't do those things, and do believe them. Right. Hey, I didn't do these 3 things, and I don't think you're a liar. So if I've not done these things and I believe you're telling me the truth, then I haven't disappointed you.
Absolutely.
And I trust you to tell me that I have. Like, we self-regulate, and we self-correlate our role in these relationships, and it's pretty unwise to do that, right? Because, shoot, I shouldn't listen to myself talk about myself sometimes. So how with any integrity am I going to pretend I know what that person's going to say?
Especially when you're
in depression.
That's like everything that your mind is telling you, do the opposite. Yeah. Literally do the opposite. Your mind's telling you to stay in bed, get the hell up.
As a knee-jerk reaction, 180 degrees of what that voice just told me.
Right.
I told my daughter one time, I said, about everybody has an inside voice, an internal voice. And what your father figured out is at about 45 years old, I realized that my internal voice is just an asshole. Like, he's just not a good dude.
Right.
But if I don't own the language, I'm giving him the mic. Like, stress is like a open mic night at a bad bar. Mm-hmm. And the big voice is going to try to get their mic as a default. But all you have to do is script and program what you're going to say, and then he just goes to the drum set.
And so we talk about this book a lot, Winning the War in Your Mind.
Yeah.
I just gifted one to DV, and it's my 3rd time going through the book.
Yeah.
So I looked at my answers the first 2 times I went through
mm-hmm.
it, and then I was like,
have they matured? Have they evolved?
Dude, so much. Like, in the beginning, it was like, because it asks you questions like, are your thoughts like one of the the first chapter of the book, you do a thought audit. So you write down your thoughts throughout the day and you think about them. So the first half is offensive questions.
Yeah.
So are you offensive and defensive? And one of the questions is, are your thoughts building you up or tearing you down? So it's a list of like 20 questions.
Yeah.
The first time I went through it, I was like, my thoughts are building me up.
Here's the right answer.
Yeah. It was like my thoughts are building me up.
Here's
like
what you want to hear. Here's what you want to hear me say.
I'm super confident. I think I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And then the second time I went through it,
Mm-hmm.
it was like, are your thoughts building you up? I was like, my thoughts are destroying me.
Yeah.
Right. Like, are your thoughts honoring God? Like, the only thoughts I have about are myself.
Yeah.
And so going through that book the third time, I was like, so this is what it feels like to be going through war in your mind. And dude,
most of life is mortaring, man.
Right.
For those, and most of the listeners ideally don't know, I've never mortared anything before or been mortared. That's awful.
I haven't. So.
But mortaring is this like just acknowledgement that you're not going to be right for a little bit. And it's like boom, 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 boom. And you bracket your way in. One of the most confused I've ever been is like we hit something the first time. I was like, mortar hit.
Right.
Like, what do we do? I'm like, I don't know, man. I've never hit anything the first time. Like, nobody move. Fire for effect, right?
Yeah, right.
But I mean, that's really what it is that's why I'm a fan of doing things multiple times, right? It's like, oh man, because you're in a different season of your life and you have these different perspectives. And I love that you're writing it down so you can see, like, feelings are real, but they respect facts. And it's a fact that that's how you felt the first time you read it. It's a fact that's how you read it the second time. And understanding those two as facts allows you to mature and adjust the trajectory.
Well, and it also showed me my prayer was for God to turn me into the person I want to be. And we talked about this too, but
be ready for that one because
he's
gonna.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, but when you're in it, you're not like, man, this is awesome. I love that I'm finding that my thoughts are destroying me. It's like, but you have to go through that fire and you have to, because the first two times I went through the book, and the first time I went through the book was after Matt died, and I was building the 30-day challenge, and I was, was so passionate about it, and obviously I thought highly of myself for right or wrong, but obviously that wasn't a great time in my life.
Well, hold on. Like, let's be wrong then and wrong now are different animals, right? Like right then, that's the right way to feel. All you learn, I mean, I want to be intentional about this. Just because you felt that way then doesn't mean you were wrong then.
Right, true.
Just because you felt differently the next time you did it doesn't mean you're wrong then. And now that you feel the way, what it means is we change, we evolve.
Right.
And I think one of the things I say is like, there's no X on the map that you get to. The house, the spouse, the car, the job. This is my belief. There's no X on the map that you get to and everything's great. What there is X is on a map worth going to and people worth going with. And I believe you bounce around towards Jesus till you meet him.
Mm-hmm.
And once you realize that, this is an adventure, you give yourself grace. And when you recognize that your mistakes are milestones for other people, like, hey, I can turn my mistakes into data points for you. I can allow you the more authentic and honest I am, the more I allow you to remember what I learned the hard way.
Right.
And if you look at life as like this tapering triangle towards this destination that we want, and you just kind of bounce like pinball towards
100%
the end state. And when you look at life that way, you give yourself grace to be imperfect in the pursuit of that.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think for me, I realized though that you have to go through the valley. Like the value that I gained from that book,
there's a tapering.
Right.
So you got to recognize the inefficient.
The value I gained in that book through being at my low points was way, way more than the value I got from the book from being at the high points. And it's because I actually had to do the work and really pay attention to my thoughts and like, okay, how do I escape these negative thought patterns and how do I create a mindset? And I'm, trust me, still working on it, but how do you create a mindset that is positive, and then
Yeah, but
honor
man,
Scott.
you're asking. I watch you and Lucas do this all the time. I'm really proud of you. And one of the things I think about all the time is like you're asking yourself hard questions and answering them honestly decades sooner than a lot of us did, right? What that means is you're going to have this authentic life that's loaded with the appropriate weight of life for longer than a lot of us, right? So, and that's imperfectly perfect, right? That kind of thing.
Right.
My deal is like, and that's why we got to surround ourselves with people. Like I'm not going to allow you to be dishonest with yourself, even with the bad stuff.
Mhm.
Like we talk about, is like, hey, I need people to tell me the truth. The thing with that is we typically say that in this critical sense. I need people to call me out. Why don't I listen to them when they're calling me out on the good stuff too? Like I need to weight the good stuff as much as I do the bad stuff, right? And
Even more.
you're like, hey, Clint, you're chubby. I'm like, shut up. I know, right?
Yeah, right.
Hey, Clint, you make people feel good about themselves. Why is that so much harder for me to accept, right? So I got to knock that off because either you're a liar when you say that to me, or one of us is lying to me.
Why
and
is
it's
that, man?
probably
Like,
not you.
why is it so hard? Like, because I'm the same way. Like, people are like, it's like when people say like, you're making such an impact. It's like I don't believe them. It's
Well,
like you just
I think there's a primal instinct. I think there's a difference between I think being safe is scary because because it's hard to believe it, right? And so I think there's just this urgency or this desire to not be done yet. Like you can be doing a good job and not be done yet. Like when you were an athlete, if a
Right.
coach told you great job in the second quarter, you could accept that and not quit the game. Hey, you got 2 more quarters. So you got to look at these kind of positive feedback loops as like, I have this series as a linebacker, man, and I go sit on the bench. I'm well served to believe my coach when he tell me I did a good job and get ready for the next one. And we just got to know that, like, hey, this is a compliment that acknowledges my efforts in the recent history. It's not saying you're done, and it's not saying you can stop now. It's data. It's a data point. It's a feedback, right? And we
Right.
need those. We need the positive as much as the negative. Neither of them are inherently good or bad. We vilify one for the other when we weight them one more than the other. They're just data.
Yeah, and I, when I'm again starting to see now is to that point is the importance of celebrating your wins. I remember at the 38 challenge, you pulled me aside and you were like, "I need you to slow down for a second.
Yeah.
Look at all that you've accomplished." And that's always been such a hard thing for me is to like not look at it as like, okay, we accomplished it. What's next, right? Like take some time to celebrate, which is not a bad mindset to have.
Yeah.
But taking that.
And I hope I said this. I don't know if I said this, and if I didn't, I apologize. But I wanted to. Is like, hey, I want you to see what you've done. I'm not telling you you're done yet. I'm not saying I think you're done yet, and I'm just saying you're done good, and that's how you go to the next series. Like the best running backs, they don't score touchdowns every series. They get closer, right? If the threshold is like you're only good running back when you score a touchdown every time you have the ball, well, that's not realistic. That's not how. I got 11 dudes that want to break your heart on defense, right?
Right.
So we have to accept progress, and we have to accept positive momentum, not as permission to be done yet, but as a data point that says, hey, remember how I say there's a difference between being lost and being wrong?
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I can't be is lost. I don't like being wrong, but wrong means I'm still on the map. I'm not lost, right? And I can work with wrong. I can get better at wrong. And the trick is just to be, just make new mistakes, be less wrong over time. That's all endurance is. Endurance in competition is being wrong less for longer than your competition.
And dude, I remember calling you and we were talking about the things I was going through, and I was like, I say there's a difference between being wrong and lost.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, yep. And I was like, dude, I'm so lost. And you're like, well, we're lost together, so therefore we're just wrong.
Well, one of the things, is like if you know you're lost, you're probably just wrong.
Right.
Because to be lost is to be clueless, and or to not be willing to do the work. If you feel lost and you don't want to be lost anymore, now you're just wrong because you know where you are and you know where you want to be.
That's where I was.
Lost is not knowing anything.
That's right.
And trying to be okay with it.
That's where I was. I was lost. Yeah, like I was lost.
You felt lost.
I felt lost, but I knew I was wrong, and I was afraid of the amount of work that it was going to take to get out of the spot that I was in.
Yeah.
Like that's
why creating those X's is important, right? And there's usually like one big X. There's a lot of little X's on the way there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just being patient for the process. I say, man, be patient for the process and just make new mistakes. And if you're patient for the process, you make new mistakes. When you go back and you look at the books where you take your notes, you can see progress. That's one of the things I've learned, like way late in my life. Some of the most amazing people I've ever known. I mean, my teammates at Navy, Drew, Ben, a bunch of guys. They journaled like way sooner than I did.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt, one of my greatest guys in the teams, right? And one of the things he told me one time is like, I don't journal so I can remember what I did. I can journal so I can see the progress I've made. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like it became it felt less like a diary and more like a progress. I mean, it was just really interesting to me, and learning how to do that's been pretty cool.
Right. We'll wrap up here soon. One of the things that helped me and continues to help me is looking at the spot that I was in and then writing how getting through this would help people down the road. Because now when I talk to the same tier 1 guy that you did yesterday, and we had a 30-minute conversation about mental health.
Yeah.
Now I can talk to him and understand. I mean, obviously different situations, but
pain's pain.
Pain's pain, and the feeling. He was like, 3 weeks ago I couldn't get out of bed, and I was like, dude, isn't that crazy how? And we were just like talking like the same language. When before I'd never been in like debilitated, but now, going through it. And I remember writing I would write in my journal, and I would say like, the fact that you're going through this now means that you'll be able to relate to people on a deeper level.
You're going to allow someone to remember what you learned the hard way.
Right. Yeah. When you get through it.
And that's why the map imagery just makes so much sense to me. Is like, for me, is like, you've heard me say it a million times. There's 4 maps I'm living on: the ball field, the battlefield, the boardroom, the breakfast table. For seasons of my life, those were literal. The ball field was a literal map. The battlefield was a literal map. The boardroom. Now, for me, the ball field is how I guide and govern this process of performing at a high level, mentally and physically. Like, that's why I told that guy. I said, "Hey, man, you're helping people discover what you're trying to remember, and that's virtuous and noble and purposeful." And it makes the pain of having to remember it less, right? The battlefield is how I guide and govern this desire to protect those who've been entrusted me morally, mentally, spiritually, and physically. So, like, for me, the breakfast table is the base map. You press in Google Maps, first map pops up. These others are the layers on top of it. And so I just got to make sure these X's are complementary and supportive of each other. It's like I've got units flanking each other, maintaining perspective as each of us takes our ground toward this X we say is important to us.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, and all maps are, man, they're 4 boundaries in an X that you think is right.
Mm-hmm.
And building the boundaries, frankly, is perhaps the most important thing. Like, I told you a story about that young guy, really successful young guy. And he's like, man, I'm alone. Like, I want to have a family. I'm like, where's your map? He goes, I don't have one. So I grabbed this piece of pen or paper, and I wrote on this, I said, don't marry a girl you meet after midnight when you're both drunk on Friday night. Don't marry a girl you meet after midnight when you're both drunk on Saturday night. Make sure she's not a serial killer. Hope she loves Jesus. He's like, real looks better than your map. You don't even have a map.
Right.
And I put this X there. I said, married in 3 years, father in 5. And he's like, real? I'm like, I don't know, but any of this is better than not having a map.
Right. Just go towards
it. But that son of a gun's about to get engaged, man. And
right.
And he's like, how do I make progress? I'm like, I'll tell you what I did. I met Amy first night. I said, will you marry me? She's like, can we go on a date? I'm like, yep. And I said, you're the prettiest girl ever say yes to a date with me. So I'm either going to keep asking you to marry me until you say yes or call the cops. So just, And so we went out on that second night, and then I had to go back early because I was on academic probation per standards at the Naval Academy. And I went by to see her, and she handed these tapes to me. That's how old I am. She gave me 6 cassette tapes. It was Tommy Nelson's Song of Solomon, how the Bible tells us to to date, court, and get married.
Mm.
She's like, if you want to date me, you'll listen to these. I'm like, you're hot. I'll listen whenever you want to.
Yeah, right.
It'd be Carl Sagan's The Universe. I'm going to listen to this thing over and over again. But man, I listened to that thing twice. What she was really giving me was a map.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, hey, this is the map my creator gave me and you. So it's not like she built the map. She's like, here's the map. Dating is this, and then courting is this, and then getting married is this, right? And I didn't have to break trail, man. I just had to be consistent with a well-laid path in front of me. And
Right.
and the cool thing about living in community is living in community with people is like a cheat code to building maps. What I tell people is like, all the borders are no more than, no less than, not with, not without, no sooner than, no later than, just whatever these kind of boundaries are. And when you live around people, you get a lot of insight into good borders and boundaries, right? And I think I told you this before. Reduction is progress. It's a weird thing, man. When you're going in between maps, ball field, battlefield, boardroom, like we know that discipline is more don't than do. And we know this on the ball field. We know this on the battlefield. And all of a sudden I came to the boardroom and I wanted to try everything because I was scared, not because I was capable and stuff. But I had to remember, like, not only is reduction progress, knowing what I don't want to do, knowing where I don't want to live. Reduction is the most ruthless and aggressive and productive form of progress. When you start ruling stuff out, then the X's just kind of leap off the page towards you, right? So start building maps, man. And that's kind of what you, hey, I'm gonna come to Dallas, not Austin. Okay. I'm not going to do this. I am going to do this. I'm not going to go there. I am going to go there. I'm not going to, I am going to. Those are just boundaries.
Well, yeah. And the reason for a lot of the reason why, and it's, saying no to, certain things in my life that were not serving me anymore. Or
Sure.
Maybe they never did. And like you said, like and when you start to take those things out, that's a hard thing too. Super hard.
Man, I have this issue with this whole New Year's resolutions thing. And I told people a couple of years ago, I said, they said, what's your New Year's resolutions? Like, I don't make resolutions. I make reductions. So I have New Year's reductions because I'm redlined right now. So if I want to do anything more, better, something's got to go. And that's when I came up with my daily dots.
Right.
When you're doing long-term stuff, it's hard to see what you did that year. So it's easier for me to know what I didn't do that day than what I actually did do. By default, I did something if I didn't do these things. So for me, the daily dots are kind of this is what, at the end of the day, I'll know I did or didn't do these things. And so it's do one thing, do one thing more, one thing less, one thing differently, one thing new, one thing I miss, one thing that scares me, and then one thing the same, because I don't suck at everything, right? And I have it. I'll show it to you. It's ball field, battlefield, boardroom, breakfast table. The dots down.
You gave me one. I've been doing it. Yeah.
I was like,
and I was just about to say, maybe we provide that as a resource for people.
Sure, I love that, man.
But it also is very helpful when you're going through depression because like, okay, what
it helps you not feel lost.
Yeah, it's like what made me feel good today? Okay, exercise, sun, talking to a friend. I'm gonna do more of that.
And it also gives you permission to accept progress for not doing something.
Right.
Hey, I didn't do this.
Right.
Like LinkedIn is my Facebook, man. LinkedIn, it starts out productive, catch up with people, proud of them, send a note to them, and now start competing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, that's some guy. I'm like, he's so much smarter than me. He's like, I'm better looking at him, but he's smarter.
Right.
And it's like it becomes this wormhole for me. So like it's consistent. Do one thing less, it's be on LinkedIn. So I literally had that. So like I log out.
Dude, me too.
Log into LinkedIn, log out.
I deleted.
And then I forgot I had that password thing. So it just, as soon as I clicked on it,
Yeah.
logs in. All right. So then I had to put another browser. So LinkedIn is in another browser that I got to remember is open. But it was a byproduct of do one thing less. I've probably gotten, I would say, somewhere between 2 to 3 hours back in a week, just because it's not an open tab on my main browser.
Dude, and I did the exact same thing with Instagram and I deleted Instagram, Snapchat, LinkedIn off my phone because I was looking and I was taking inventory of what made me feel good and what made me feel bad.
Yeah.
And social media made me feel so much worse. And I was spending so much time on it.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm deleting this off my app. So I got my old iPhone. It's so old that you could still plug your cord into the iPhone. So I deleted them off my phone and I downloaded those social media apps.
You don't talk about how old that is.
On
In my
the
mind, It's not a BlackBerry.
And then I put it on a cassette tape. But no, so I put it on the old phone.
Yeah.
So that so it's not on my phone that I use all the time.
So I love that you just said that. I was actually just about to recommend that, but you're already doing it.
Yeah.
I got a friend who is somewhat. I mean, his business is on the social media.
That's
right?
what ours
so
is
he
too.
can't
Yeah.
not.
That's what ours is too.
So
yeah.
what he did is he got his old phone, and it's a social media phone. He has his main phone, and he carries his social. But the act of having reached in his pocket, put this one down, pick this, like it throttles him, it regulates him. So you're doing. I thought he was really smart. I'm like, Brandt was doing that too, and he's younger than you.
Well, I said what I'm gonna do is just keep it in this room, and then block an hour off of my schedule. So the only time I can be on social media is when I'm creating content in this room.
Yeah. But listen, let's celebrate the fact that you put it on a separate phone.
Right.
You have my main phone, then my Insta phone. Like even marginalizing immediate access to it. Like that's brilliant. That's like putting the ice cream in the refrigerator out in the garage. Like I like ice cream, but I also like sitting down. So there's times where like, do I want to sit down or do I want to walk out to the garage and get the ice cream? Well, if I walk out in the garage, dogs are going to jump on me. Then I'm going to get bit by my dog again. I'll just sit here.
Right.
But it's just these little things. It's like deliberately disadvantaging ourselves, keeping it within our lives, but not being a slave to it by proximity.
Dude, and that's what I realized is how much of social media is an addiction, and how much
dopamine. You listen to Huberman talk about that.
Yeah,
stuff.
100%.
I mean, it is, and that ought to give you some grace for it too. You're not undisciplined.
No,
you're human.
Right. And there's so many people who are in the same boat. Like it's scary, man. And like when I delete off my phone, I would like literally get that itch for it. And I'd be like, reach for my phone and be like, oh wait, it's not there anymore. Like, yeah, it's nuts.
I love these, man. These are good. Listen, I'm proud of the progress you're making. You need to be too. If you want to argue about it, I'm going to win. Like with Isaac, well, let's play a game. He's like, this is one when you always win. I'm like, yeah, it is. And I'll make you feel good because at least you're playing it, right? But that living out loud and living authentically gives other people permission to do the same thing, and so it's exciting to see you. These moments of reflection, recalibration, restoration. They feel, when I talk about reloading, like the difference between being an excellent lead is, do you reload when others relax? But here's what reloading is. For me, reloading is review, rest, recover, revel. So it's deliberate stillness, right? And that's when you're getting shot at, sometimes the best thing to do is you get cover, you stay where you are, right?
Right.
And so yeah, that absence was absence is the wrong way to describe it because it makes it sound negative. It was forced stillness, forced, uncomfortable, incredibly important, very relevant stillness, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, now we're in the same spot, so we'll be able to do a lot more of these.
Yeah, this has been a massive upgrade to the podcast studio.
100%.
I thought I was so cool because I had like these old iPhones set up and their cameras, and Lucas is just like, oh, that's neat, that's cute. Like, what are you gonna do? Then I come down there, he's like, this actually looks pretty legit. So, so this is like a functioning facility. So love you, proud of you.
Love you, man.
38 challenge, excited to see that grow, know it's a blessing to others, and know that you're not done yet. So just take the compliment and don't make it weird.
I won't.
That's what I tell Amy. He's like, you look beautiful. And then she's arguing. I was like, will you not argue me? Like, if I'm going to tell you you're pretty, just say thank you. Like, I don't want to argue with you about it, right?
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you bet, bud. So later. Talk to y'all soon.
Later.